All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Difficult Conversations by Supply the Why. I'm Dean. I'll be your conversational tour guide tonight. And as promised, we got a great one lined up. We are here with Sheriff Alfonzo Williams of Burke County, Georgia. He is the top cop in that area, and he's going to be sharing stories about his journey and some of the leadership crises that he's faced along the way and how he's negotiated that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring the sheriff up. Sheriff, how are you, sir?
Hey, Dan, I'm fine, brother. How about you?
I couldn't be better. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for a difficult conversation, which this most certainly promises to be.
Well, thank you, man. I'm up to the task and ready to communicate with folks on whatever tough issues they have coming. What's going on across the country, leadership, power, politics, policing. I'm here, ready for it.
All right, so let's get into it. So I've been following you for quite some time, and one of the things that I've always wanted to talk to you about was how your journey in law enforcement started. So if you could just give us a brief story about how you started, why you started, and why you stayed.
Yeah. So look, since about age 8 years old, I wanted to be a police officer. That was my short-term goal, to be a police officer. Long-term goal was to become a detective. And so right after high school, I joined the police department, applied and was hired at 19. And year and 5 months later, I found myself being promoted to detective. And so my career started from there. I specialized in child abuse and violent crimes and rapes, robberies, murders, ag assaults, done all of that. And, after a few years of doing that, I decided, leadership was going to come my way. You just don't stay there where you are, or you're not going to make anything. Can't take care of a family on $25,000, $30,000 a year. So we're in the South here. You got to work for it. I didn't go to college right after high school because I didn't think college was for me. Didn't think I was smart enough to go, actually. And so after about 10 years on the job, I realized I needed to go to college and so that I could prepare myself to move up. And took me another 2 years to make up my mind. So I entered college for the first time at 30 years old. Got an associate's degree, bachelor's degree, went right on into a master's degree, and I've since completed a second master's degree. I'm all about education in our agency. I'm all about service to mankind. This profession has been good to me. I've been chief of police for a couple of different agencies, and of course sheriff now. So I've been director of a police academy. I worked for the district attorney's office for 7 years as an investigator, so I've got a ton of courtroom experience. I've testified in the superior courts of Georgia about 8 times on use of force issues. I've taught thousands of police officers in my 32-year career, and here I am having difficult conversations with the man. So here we are. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you. And I just wanted to just circle back. So you got into law enforcement. Did you grow up always wanting to be in law enforcement? Was that your goal all along, or did you just kind of stumble into it?
Yeah, just stumbled into it. Didn't have any family history of folks being in law enforcement. I think I'm the first and one of the only in my family to be in law enforcement. I think it's a calling. My favorite Bible verse says that the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. And I'm here every day serving mankind. It's what I've done all my life. I just didn't have a name to put to it. It's what my mother did all of her life in her own way. And I finally realized that it's service, and that's what we're doing.
Well, outstanding. So from there, let's talk about leadership. At some point, you realized that leadership was in your future, and that's what motivated you to go back and get your degrees. Yes.
Yes.
All right. Talk about that process a little bit. Did you have somebody that kind of crimped your lawn and took you under their wing, or did you have an aha moment or two?
Look, in law enforcement, I had mostly bad leaders, maybe one or two good ones. I figured out what to do by looking at the majority of the leaders I had and saying, I'm not going to do that. If I ever get in charge, I won't do this, or I won't do that. I'll care about people. I'll put people ahead of paperwork. I'll put people ahead of processes. And so I like to say that I lead from the heart. My heart drives me and tells me what to do, and sometimes it gets a little foggy because I am leading with my heart, and I do care about people. But at the end of the day, it works for me, and I'm trying to in every position I've had currently and previously, it's my job to grow people with me, and I don't say things like he works for me, she works for me. It's they work with me. Uh, I don't talk like I have people under my command. We don't use that kind of language. We are servant leaders here, and it's working out quite well.
So talk to me about the servant leadership style. That's something that's become more and more popular in law enforcement, where you're right. It's more of embracing that team mentality because let's face it, as leaders of agencies, we can't flow the way we need to flow if we don't have competent and excited people working for us. Would you agree?
Yeah. So we've got to invest in people, and if we invest in people and take care of them, they know that we care. They know that we're genuine. They see that we are interested in their career goals and we're trying to help them get to where they need to be, then they will perform. I don't have to have conversations in my agency about loyalty. I don't ever get up in front of a group and say, "Now I'm sheriff, and you better be loyal to me." They don't. They don't ever hear that kind of talk. What they hear is, "I love you. I care about you. I'm going to help you get to where you need to be. We're going to coach and mentor and encourage you." And I realize not everybody is going to take to that. Those that don't leave, but those who understand it stay and work with us. And that's who we are. We're putting that into practice every day. We're making sure that we're growing leaders. So you talk about succession leadership. We're growing leaders. I've got a vision. The vision will be here long after I'm gone. Visions don't die. Visionaries do. So my vision is being handed out every day to those folks that I work with. So if something happens to me tomorrow, this place can still carry on because they understand the vision, and the vision is about service to mankind.
I love that. Visions don't die, visionaries do. That's profound. I'm going to take that with me. So with that in mind, how do you feel or how do you get folks on board with procedural justice? There's been a lot of talk about that in, the President Obama when he came out with his 6 pillars of 21st century policing. Procedural fairness was one of them. Give us your thoughts on that, and how do you get buy-in in your building with that?
Look, it's all about service. That's the very essence of what we do. Procedural justice is nothing more than making sure that we are fair and equitable in what we do. We've got to take care of each other inside. If we're not fair and just and equitable to one another within the agency, then what can you expect when they go outside of the agency? We have to, when every agency I've been a leader of, we have made sure that we cleaned up our stuff in-house. If I treat them like crap in-house, they're going to go outside the house and treat our constituency the way I'm treating them. If I'm unfair, if they see inequities, if they see injustices, if they see questionable ethics, if I'm asking them to do things that are immoral and illegal, they're going to go out and do the same thing. So it starts with the leader. And if I espouse procedural justice and equity and fairness and service to mankind, not just service to our kind, but service to mankind, doesn't matter what color you are, just be fair, be equitable, be just in your dealings. They see that inside, they can then take it outside. You ask anybody, I have 121 coworkers here, 120 coworkers, every one of them will tell you the sheriff believes in service above all else. And that's what they take out into the communities we serve. That builds trust, respect, fairness. It's like I say every day, the crisis, the cleanup starts before the crisis ever occurs. The cleanup
I
starts
love that.
before the crisis occurs. In other words, when we're making friendships and relationships and partnerships, we're already cleaning up before we have a crisis, so that when the crisis comes, then we're not getting to know one another. We already know each other. We already have the relationships. The trust is already there because we've been serving.
I love that concept. I talk about it all the time, Al. If you've caught any of our other shows or anybody that's been with us, you've heard me talk about something called a relational credit score. And a relational credit score is exactly that. Just like you have to establish a financial credit score, which means you have to have a history of paying your bills on time, you have to show responsibility, you have to have all that established up front before you can go and get a favorable loan, before you can get those low mortgage rates. Well, building a relationship with the community is the same way. You have to have that upfront trust before the bad incident happens and you show up and say, hey, listen, you need to trust us that we are going to investigate this properly. You need to trust us that we are going to keep our word and be here when we say we're going to be here. So I love where you're going with that piece as far as doing that. I don't care where you go in the country, we all talk about it, but on here in Supply the Why, we refer to it as a relational credit score. So that's fantastic.
Love that concept, relational credit score. I've got a friend, Dean Crisp, who calls it bank of trust, and you're constantly making deposits in that bank of trust. So, I agree with you. Thank you.
Outstanding. So we're going to hit the chat a little bit. So Mike wants to know, does leading from the heart as opposed to leading from the mind conflict with department policy and or community standards at times?
Yeah, because the word of God says, so a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. What's in your heart ought not be in conflict with policy and procedures and standards of the community, because it should all be about service. It should all come back to service to mankind. And there shouldn't be any conflict. Just as there should not be any policies and procedures that conflict with state law, there shouldn't be any ideations in your mind or in your heart that are in conflict with your mission, which is to protect and serve mankind. I don't see where there's any conflict there, or perhaps you got to do some cleaning around the heart.
All right. So, Mike, what I'm going to ask you to do is, because I know Mike well. He's one of the great contributors on Difficult Conversations. So, Mike, if you could come up with for instance, I'll circle back with you and we can revisit that, because I think a lot of people feel the same way on that. That sometimes there's a mistake of the mind versus mistake of the heart, and the difference is that you're trying to do the right thing, but it ain't really doing the right thing. So it's that kind of a deal. All right. So Jose has a question or a comment. He says, very true. It starts in-house. Unfortunately, a lot of commanders do not treat their employees with dignity. Hence, the best resource officers take it to the public. Any thoughts on that comment from Jose?
Well, look, it's a conversation you and I had earlier before we came on air, and that is, you have to search within yourself. Okay, when you're being beat down by supervisors who are cynical or dismissive of best practices, or those folks who really care more about processes and outcomes than they do people, you just have to find a way to move yourself on, get away from those folks. They're dangerous to you. And as I said to you earlier, I've had a lot of bad leaders, and I learned what not to do. Resign to the fact that you're not going to be the way you see that person behaving when you climb the ladder. Get yourself in a position to do well so that you can be recognized as a leader. Oftentimes in this business, we say, I want to be a leader. Rather than saying I want to be a leader, do those things that leaders do and make yourself marketable so that folks will want to put you in leadership positions, rather than just saying I want to be a leader. And slowly we're able to turn the tides and change those mindsets.
So with that said, when you're trying to change those mindsets with people, how much resistance do you face, and how do you deal with that resistance?
Look, you're going to face a lot of resistance. I've had probably more jobs than most. And I went to some jobs and I stayed one or two. I stayed a year, 2 or 3. I stayed 2 years, and I've been on this job for 4.5 years. It's the longest I've ever held a job, any one job, 4.5 years. You can call me unstable, or you can say I was on a trajectory. I knew where I was going. I knew where I was headed. I prepared myself to be here as sheriff one day. It worked out for me, even when people didn't understand the mission. I was on a mission, and they didn't understand where I was headed. I wasn't trying to please people. Do what you know to be right and just and fair and equitable. Go after what it is, whatever it is you want. Keep yourself focused. Get away from worrying about what people have to say. You know, half are going to be mad, half are going to like it. You're not in it for a popularity contest. You're trying to do what's right. And if you'll do that, stay focused, you'll win. Obviously, I've been around folks who were really horrible or didn't treat people well. I always kept my nose clean so that I could speak up and speak out.
So let me put a little meat on the bones for people. So what Al was talking about was, before we go on, we have a backstage portion of the show where we just kind of talk about the format. I get a little conversation going, and we spoke about the case of all cases, the Derek Chauvin, George Floyd case. And we talked about how the difficulty of being a brand new officer that's in a training capacity, and then when you see your training officer or your supervisor do something that's unethical, how do you handle that situation? What support do you give as a leader to those new officers to let them know that when they do come forward and they do say something like, "Hey, Sheriff or Sarge, I saw this happen. I don't think it was right." What do you do to protect them from any kind of bullying or retaliation?
Well, yeah, it's a top-down approach, and I think that you'd be surprised. In the 4.5 years I've been sheriff here, we've probably had 2 complaints of excessive force, neither which was substantiated. 4.5 years and only 2 complaints of excessive force. So every deputy here knows that we're going to do what is right and fair and equitable. We're going to be transparent. We're not going to hide anything. We're not going to cover up anything. This public knows that body cameras are going to be on. And if the body camera is not on, the complainant's going to get the benefit of the doubt. If an officer says, "Well, it was happening so fast, I didn't have time to turn it on." Or, "Sheriff, I forgot to charge it up from last night. I worked a long shift." No excuses, none. And so when you espouse that kind of accountability and responsibility, it lessens the opportunity for folks to make excuses. And so those new officers in the Chauvin situation, I don't care that they were right out of the police academy. If you're going to be so selfish as to be concerned about your job and your pension more so than you are about some man being killed in the street in public, then to hell with them. We don't need those kinds of people in police work. Everybody can't do this job. But to the ones who can, you got to be willing to call out those kinds of injustices. Chauvin, that wasn't the first time he has acted that way. That's
Agreed.
aggression. And he was very comfortable because he had been allowed to get away with it so many times before. And some of those folks in that agency have blood on their hands because they allowed him to get to that point.
I agree with you 100%. You're a defensive tactics instructor, use of force instructor, as am I. The dead giveaway to me about the level of comfort he had doing that was the hands in the pockets.
You bet, Dean. Hands in the pocket. We know in police work that if we're going to die, we're probably going to die at the hands of another. And when your hands are in your pocket, it's because you're very comfortable with your surroundings. And he was obviously very comfortable. He was not afraid of George Floyd at that point. And his arrogance and ego spoke loud and clear and caused the death of a man.
I agree with you. So, Al, I'm going to hit the chat real quick. We have a couple people that have some comments/questions. So Mike wants to know, well, first he wants to say thank you for your service. What programs do you have that has the police interact with the community, like Coffee for a Cop or a Christmas drive that Mike's local PD has?
Oh gosh, we've got a ton of them. You check us out on our Facebook page, Burke County Sheriff's Office Facebook page. We're always in the community. We're heavily into our community. Shop with a Cop, toys at Christmas with children. Every child in this county, it doesn't matter if they live in this county or not, can come to a Christmas program we have where they get to sit on the lap of Santa and take a picture with Santa and have hot chocolate and snacks, and they each get a toy, a brand new unwrapped toy. We have for every month of the year, there's something going on. We have Easter egg hunts here. We have cookouts in all of our public housing areas during the summer. We go from one to the other and do hot dogs and hamburgers and drinks, and we give out ice cream. We're involved in every facet of our community, and we do Thanksgiving meals for folks. We're in our nursing homes. We go to our daycare centers. We're just heavily involved. We work with other entities within the county to reach our public. Sir Robert Peel said it in 1829. Public are the police are the public. We're all in this together. We need one another. And we built a house for a quadriplegic and his family, a guy who got a rare form of meningitis and lost all of his limbs, had a wife and 3 kids. He was the breadwinner. This sheriff's office built a house worth $350,000 by taking to Facebook and internet and raising money and getting donations. We built that house, and the family is living there. That's the kind of thing we do here in Burke County.
That's amazing. So it sounds to me like you're really serious about humanizing the badge, the person behind the badge, and letting your community know that, hey, we're people just like you are, right?
Yeah. So often we want to do this job as law enforcement officers, but we're still fathers. We're dads, we're uncles, we're friends in the community. So we always want to handle an issue in our official capacity. I drive a school bus most days here. I'm a fill-in or substitute bus driver. Early in the mornings, before I ever make it into the office, I'm picking up kids and getting them to school.
Really?
Take my lunch break and go back and pick them up in the afternoon and get them home. It's not, I don't need that money. It's not much money, but it gives me a chance to connect with children outside of a law enforcement capacity. It gives me a chance to connect with parents at the stop, to hug kids getting on the bus and to give them a high five on the way home. That's connecting with the community. And that's what we do.
That's incredible. There's not many firsts in this line of work, but that is a first. I've never heard of anybody going that in depth to become interwoven into the fabric of their community. That is fantastic. So the chat is lighting up here. So a gentleman that I think you're familiar with named Eric, he says, great dialogue between you two. It's all about building a rapport with the community. My sheriff has preached that since the academy. Build a rapport with individuals and they will help you in the future. That's an outstanding comment. And then from there, Heidi says, what has the community response been to your leadership style? And do they notice a big difference from the previous sheriffs?
Well, certainly our community knows what we're about. They know we're all about service. They know we're about service to mankind. We have a huge following. I think we are up to 20,000 or so Facebook followers. People depend on us. They depend on us for information. If it's about the weather, they're going to the Burke County Sheriff's Office page to hear about the weather. They know that if we're going to have storms and trees are down, our chainsaws are going to be oiled and gassed and ready to go. We've got pickup trucks that our folks in our sheriff's office drive. They're going out. They're going to be clearing the roadways before the road department ever gets up and about. We don't make excuses. We find ways to help people. Our leadership style is service to mankind. It's espoused throughout. It's new to them, but it's working, and it's very much appreciated by this community. We're not seeing the uptick in violent crime. As you know, it's up 25 to 33% across the country, depending on where you look. Even all around us, folks are seeing an increase in violent crime. We're not seeing it here in Burke County because we have an amazing team of folks like Eric McCants and many, many others who work hard, who believe in our mission. They're not trying to be loyal to the sheriff. They're loyal to the mission. And the mission is to serve mankind.
Outstanding. So the chat's lighting up, so I'm going to keep it rolling here, Al. So Jose says, love it. Change the narrative. As much as public safety officers think this is a downtime, I'm excited about it. Sheriff Alfonzo Williams, do you think this is a great time to change policing? Meaning, can we actually take care of our community while lifting our good officers to be the best guardians that they can be? What do you think?
We most certainly can. We've got to change the narrative, Dean. As you well know, if you've taught at a police academy, it was always the teaching was that if you want to go home at the end of the shift or go home at the end of the night, you got to think everybody's going to kill you. You got to think everybody's got a gun. Everybody's going to hurt you. If a guy gets within 21 feet of you with a knife, there's no way you can survive other than to shoot him. And we have put people on such a high state of alert. We got to bring them back down and stop having them think that everybody's going to kill you. Everybody is not trying to kill us. This is a dangerous business. Everybody can't do it, but we can't. It's almost like trying to debrief. I was a police academy director, and we get folks who had served in the military and served overseas. And when they come to the police academy, they'd be on heightened alert, thinking the enemy is coming. And we'd be in these law enforcement practicals, and I'd say, hold on, guy, wait a minute, guy, that's your partner. Don't hurt him. And they'd be in the mode, in the kill mode, because that's what they were used to. And so we need to get some deprogramming training going on for some of our officers and stop thinking that everybody's out to get you. Everybody's not out to get you. Everybody is not going to hurt you. We want to go home at the end of the night, but we've got to change our training. We've got to change our implicit biases. And we've got to realize that we're here serving people. This is the most right time to change where we are. What got us here, then, won't get us where we're trying to go. What got us here was that old 50 thinking from 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We're still hiring like we did 50 years ago. We're still promoting like we did 50 years ago. We're still in that mindset that we were in 50 years ago. It bothers me every time I hear somebody say, we just need to get back to where we used to be a long time ago. I remember people had respect for the police. Well, I can remember 50 years ago, police did some horrible things to people of color. So what do you mean when you say you want it the way it used to be? What has got us to this point won't get us to where we're trying to go without changing mindsets. See, a person can't perform above his mindset. And if his mindset is that people of color scare him, he's never going to be successful until he changes his way of thinking.
So I'm gonna devil's advocate you a little bit there. So how do you change someone's mode of thinking? Because one thing that I'm sure you've noticed, Al, is people can manipulate just about any test that you can come up with. Even a lie detector test can be manipulated. And it's like, for example, a crude example is when you meet somebody in a bar that you're interested in, like in a dating way.
Yeah.
Everybody puts on their greatest face. And they talk about, and they only show the good sides of themselves in a way to make yourself most presentable. Well, people do the same thing in these job interviews. And yes, we are trained BS detectives, but still, there's still some people that are going to fall through the cracks. So how do you filter that? Well,
you filter those kinds of things by looking at a person's actions and not so much what comes out of their mouth. I was an interrogation instructor for a number of years and taught it very well, where we used to say, you know what, the mouth can learn to lie, but the body does not know how. You got to pay attention to more than what's coming out of a person's mouth. You can't, you'll meet somebody and they'll say, well, it's nice to meet you. And I'm thinking to myself, really, you really don't know me that well yet. I know it's cliche-ish, but you really don't know. And I think that we've got to watch people's actions. What's in a man's heart was what's in his mind, and I think you'll discern the true spirit of a person given some time. When they're under stressful conditions, their thought processes, how they write, what they say, their interactions with people, the complaints that will be coming in, and especially when they're repeated, whether they're substantiated or not. I think that you hear these officers who say things like, well, if you're out doing your job, you're going to get complaints. Well, I submit that that's not true. I think if you're out doing your job, yes, there'll be a couple of complaints come in, but it doesn't mean that you're doing a really good job because your file is full of complaints. So we've got to change those kinds of mindsets.
So I'm glad you went down that road. And again, I apologize, folks. The chat is going crazy. I'm going to try to get to as many as you can, but he's spitting science right now, and I have to get more out of him right now. So Al, with that said, you and I talked about procedural fairness, and I can give you an example. I had an officer that is, I'm talking one of your top performing type officers. Like if this was back in the day in the schoolyard and we're picking kickball teams with everybody lined up, this is going to be your first or second pick, no question. That's the kind of guy this was. So somebody came in to complain about this officer and said that this officer was rude to them because they gave him a written warning. So I asked more questions. Said, all right, well, tell me more about the interactions. Did he swear at you? Well, no, he didn't use any profanity. Okay. Did he yell at you? No, he didn't. He didn't raise his voice. All right. Did he put his hands on you? Oh, of course not. He didn't put his hands on you. I said, okay, so he gave you a written warning. So what exactly were you doing here? All right. He said that you were going 47 and a 30, which would warrant a money fine in a lot of cases, but this person gives you a written warning. What exactly is the beef? And he said, well, this officer seemed arrogant when they handed me this written warning. What do you do with that?
Well,
because I know what I did, but I want to hear what you would do, and I'll tell you what I did.
Well, a good leader, hopefully you got body camera footage where you can watch that footage.
No body cameras.
No body cameras. Well, in 2021, I just hope that leaders will get out of that mindset that we don't need body cameras. We just shouldn't have to ask you to do that in 2021. They don't tell the whole story, but it's better than he said, she said, and the supervisor is standing there saying, I don't know because I wasn't there. Yeah, that doesn't work anymore. So we just shouldn't be there. But in a case like that, and if it's what you have purported to me, then you unsubstantiate the case and you tell the guy, hey, I don't have any evidence to suggest that that the officer did anything wrong. I hear what you're saying. I empathize with you. We follow procedure, and unsubstantiate the case. And you don't.
Well, that's right along the lines of where I went. So what happened was this. So I asked a few more questions, made it conversational, and then this person started name dropping of people they knew in the department, saying that they went to school with this one and that one. So I had the citation, the written warning in my hand, and I saw this person's date of birth, and I realized that this person was older considerably than anybody in my department. So when they're telling me that they went to school with somebody that I knew to be only a couple years older than me, and this person is double-digit years older than me, right then and there, something's rotten in Denmark.
Yeah,
I knew that he lost all credibility, and I told him that. Yeah. I said, how mathematically could you have gone to school with X, Y, and Z person if you're 8 years older than this person? And then it started and he started doing like that beatboxing thing. And I said, sir, here is your written warning back. It's not actionable. You have a nice day if you don't have anything else. And I sent him on his way. Yeah. But it's one of those things.
But the body does not know how, and you move him on. Yeah.
But it's one of those things, Al, where there's some supervisors, depending on what if it's a supervisor that didn't like that officer? We've seen it. Like you said, you've had a lot of bad supervisors, as am I. Some people would have ran with that, like Barry Sanders, as an opportunity to have a gotcha moment with that officer. So how do you deal with supervisors that look at things that way?
Yeah, I think it comes down to keeping your nose clean. I mean, those situations are going to be few and far between if you're doing your job and you're being fair and equitable and doing what's right. When we all know in police work, when a supervisor really wants to get you, they will. But I think it's following policy, keeping your nose clean, making good decisions, caring for people. You're going to outlast anybody who's horrible and bad, and you'll make it. But being being a human being, being a Christian person, doesn't make life, doesn't make you immune from false allegations and criticisms. That's when it's really going to come at you. But every day, this is the Why Show. Here it is. Every day, Dean, you got to get up and remember why you do this. Are you doing it for that supervisor who's being ugly, or are you getting up doing it because you're here to serve mankind? So when police across the nation are starting to question, why am I into this business? People don't care for us. They don't understand us. They don't support us. They want to defund us. They think all of us are racist. They think that white people come to work every day with the ideology of killing a black man on video camera. All of those things. Remember why you get up and do this job every day. You're doing it because you're here to serve mankind and not be served by mankind.
Ooh, I love that. And we're going to get back to that. I believe that title, what you just said, means something. And we're going to circle back to that at the end of the show. All right, Al, we got to rapid fire some of this chat. There's a lot of people that want to get at you. Okay. So Charles says, Sheriff, what do you say when people who advocate for abolishing police or what do you say to them, I'd imagine is what that's supposed to say. And what are their responses to you? As a side note, Dean, you are the well, thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. I think highly of you too. So what do you say to people that are advocating for abolishing the police, and what kind of responses do you get from them really quick?
Well, Dean, you are the man. But what I say to people who talk about things like abolishing the police, it's just ignorance. It's silliness. Words like defund the police or whatever, reform the police. Look, we need some reformation. The public needs some as well. We need money for mental health. We don't need to take any of it from the police to give to mental health. We need the money that we have to keep folks safe. You got to decide what you're going to pay for. And I submit you wouldn't want to see what it would be like if you defunded the police and gave that money to mental health. We need to do our jobs. We need to stop letting politicians make decisions for us. We need to get police chiefs who are not afraid of their city councils. We need sheriffs who are not afraid of their constituency. Our law enforcement leaders are failing us because their only concern is to get to power. And once they get there, they do whatever it takes to stay there, even if that means sacrificing the officer on patrol in the squad car who's out there doing his job every day. Politicians, they only want to get to power and stay there.
Al, we could do a separate show just on that statement. All right. But it's powerful, but we got to move on here. So Brad says, we don't make excuses. We find ways to help people. I love that. Way to go, Sheriff.
Thanks, Brad. We talk in our agency every day about find the hard yes rather than the easy no. That's what we're doing.
All right. I love it. So Bobby Verdun, an old coach of mine from seemingly a million years ago, he says, this is phenomenal. I am not in law enforcement, but listening to the two of you gives such amazing perspective of how valuable leadership is to communities. This conversation needs to be heard nationally. #winners. Thank you, Coach V. You've always been a great supporter of me, even when I was maybe I might not have always deserved it, but thank you for sticking with me for coming up on 30 years now. So thank you for that. Sheriff, how does your agency mentor its newly promoted supervisors for optimal leadership success? Phenomenal question.
Yes, Keisha, I love the way your name is spelled. What we do is succession leadership. I'll be in Orlando, Florida in November teaching a class on leadership succession. What we got to do, imagine this, and this is not an original idea. Imagine when Jesus came on the scene and he said to his disciples, I'm here with you for a short time, and I'm going to die real soon. And I've only got a very short time to impart my knowledge to you, to tell you how to go across this world and get churches started, and how to take care of widows and children, and how to take care of one another, and how to serve mankind. I got to do it. I got to do it quickly. Go back to your agency on Monday with that mindset, because that's what we do here at Burke County Sheriff's Office. We're identifying leaders. We're imparting knowledge. I don't know how long I got to give it to them. Something could happen tomorrow, or maybe I could find another job tomorrow, but the vision lives on. Visionaries die, visions do not. You got to get it to them. You got to coach and mentor and encourage and hold them individually accountable and share mutual responsibility. That's how you grow and have leaders that will come behind you and succeed you and still do a good job. You know, those leaders that say, well, if I left here tomorrow, this place would fall apart. That's because they're horrible leaders.
Ooh.
Yeah. So if you're not training somebody to take over the why show, supply the why, if you're the only one and the show will die because you leave, then you hadn't been a good leader of the show. Your vision lives on.
I love it. At some point, I do have to get somebody that can do some of this too. We're a small shop, Sheriff, but hopefully with more viewers and more amazing guests like you, we can grow this thing and really pump it out nationally like these conversations deserve to be. Folks, I see you in the chat, and I am trying to get to you, but we have a part of the show that we have to get to. So we've talked about some sunshine and rainbows type stuff. Now we got to talk about a difficult conversation or a difficult interview that Sheriff Williams gave, where he, all right, and again, if you're listening on the podcast, both Sheriff Williams and I are black, and one of the most difficult parts of being a black police officer is every once in a while, we have to tell other people that look like us that you're in the wrong, and you kind of get what you get as far as law enforcement goes. So you had a situation where you were on CNN and probably several other networks where you were talking about a case that occurred down in Georgia involving Rayshard Brooks. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that was like?
Yeah, so I'm sure many of your viewers will remember the Rayshard Brooks case, who fell asleep in his car at the drive-through Wendy's in Atlanta, and a deputy was called there or dispatched there by the folks at Wendy's who had called, and the deputy showed up, and he talked with Mr. Brooks. Asked him on 4 occasions, 4 times he asked Brooks to pull over and sleep it off. But he was suspicious. He ended up calling a DUI officer over to conduct field sobriety. And when the second officer determined that Brooks was going to be arrested, Brooks struggled with the 2 officers, got the best of them on the ground. There was some ground fighting going on. Brooks managed to take a taser from one of the officers, and he took off running. At least one officer gave chase. Brooks bladed his body and turned back and fired the taser at the officer, at which time the officer shot Brooks and killed him. And we had all of this outrage because it was on the heels of George Floyd and some other cases. And sometimes when folks are angry and emotions are high, they tend to want to paint every case with a broad brush. And I think they did that in the Brooks case. I immediately spoke out and said, no, that was justified. It was textbook right. It was legally sound. It was the way we trained. It was best practices. It was a justified shooting. And it outraged people across this country and a couple other countries. And for 2 weeks, my phone rang off the hook, and I was everything in the world. I was an Uncle Tom. I was a bootlicker. I was the South has got me now. And if you were, that was the consensus. If you were black and if you were white, people said, "Oh, what ethical man who's standing up for what's right." It didn't bother me what color the officers were. They just happened to be 2 white officers, But the Atlanta mayor, who was probably hoping to get on the Democratic ticket with Joe Biden, was saying that the officer was wrong, forced the chief to resign, forced those officers out of a job, had to give them their jobs back, by the way. It took every law enforcement entity in this state 5 days before one of them, our chief training and public safety headquarters, took them 5 days to come out and say the shooting was justified. That's why we got a problem. We're pandering to politicians. We're pandering to emotional people who are thinking with emotion and not with science and data and training and expertise because they're afraid of their jobs.
Chief, let me jump in real quick there. So let's give a little background to those of you that are watching. Again, I'm here with Sheriff Alfonzo Williams of Burke County, Georgia. And one of the things that you do, in addition to all of the hats you've worn, is you are also a use of force defensive tactics instructor as well, right?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. So as am I. So we can speak the same language on this.
Yes.
So I want to ask you a question in relation to this. Do you feel that as a result of this seems to be, in my opinion, there's a fear of being trial by social media. And I feel like sometimes the officers try to use kit clubs to the point where it puts them in a dangerous situation. And then as a result of being in a dangerous situation, they end up having to use more force than they would have in the first place to get out of that dangerous hole they created by trying to come in with kit clubs. Do you think that maybe that played a role in this particular case?
I don't think so in this particular case, Dean. I think that the force that was used was completely justified. It was completely appropriate, textbook right. These guys did everything they could. I've watched the video, and I venture to say I've watched the video 50 times. Mm-hmm. They used de-escalation techniques. They had sympathy for him. He purported that his mother had recently died and he had been visiting the graveyard. The officer said things like, "Oh, I'm very sorry." Those are the things you don't hear on CNN or Fox News.
Yeah, somehow that didn't make it onto the mainstream media. I wonder why.
And it never made the mainstream media that the first officer asked him 4 times to pull over and sleep it off. Okay, those things didn't make it. And for folks, look, in these situations, you're in search of truth or you're in search of doubt. And those folks who are predisposed and they're in search of doubt, they're going to find out. Those folks who really want to know the truth are going to go play the video, and they're going to look and listen and hear it out and read studies. Those guys did everything appropriately. I don't think that they boxed themselves into a situation where they were afraid to do anything and then all of a sudden they overreacted. I don't think that was the case here at all. We don't use a force continuum anymore, as you well know, but they followed the force continuum, be as it were, and did everything they could to mitigate that situation. And Brooks just decided that he was not going to go back to jail for whatever reason. And he put those officers in that position, and it caused his ultimate demise. And I'm very, very sorry that those officers were put in a position to have to take a life. And I'm sorry that his family had to go through what they went through, but he made that decision.
I agree, and it's tragic all around. I'm sorry for the Brooks family. I'm sorry for the families of those officers, and part of what I was saying was definitely not a criticism of those officers. I thought that one of the videos I saw, it looked as if one of the officers was behind Mr. Brooks when they were on the ground. He looked like the arm was coming across, and then he caught himself mid moment. Said, "Oh, I can't put my arm across his neck because then people are going to say I'm trying to choke this guy out." And it looked to me like he took his arm off. Like when I saw that, and I was like, to me, that looked like maybe that was something like he was going to control the head, which is something everybody learned. That's fighting 101. You control the head, the body will follow.
That's right.
And he kind of caught himself, is what it looked like to me. Again, I haven't talked to these officers, and he took the arm away. And I was just thinking, I was wondering if maybe that was part of it.
There's no doubt that officers are in the street every day trying to walk softly so that they don't face this criticism, or they don't fall prey to an overzealous prosecutor who's trying to make a name for himself or herself by prosecuting police officers who are trying to do what's right. Look, we have millions of interactions with the public every day. They all turn out fine. Occasionally, we have a person who goes rogue and does something stupid, but officers are scared to death that they are going to be indicted by a grand jury and prosecuted by an overzealous prosecutor, such as the one they had in Atlanta on the Brooks case, who is now out of office and facing investigations himself.
All right. Outstanding. So
who's originally from Burke County, by the way.
Really?
Yes.
Well, ain't that something?
Yeah.
So I do have a comment. I got to go back a little bit. So Keisha is talking about, it sounds to me like you're talking about changing from a warrior mentality to a guardian mentality. Can you speak to that really quick in about 30, 45 seconds? Yeah,
you bet, Keisha. I think we, throughout the police academy, we're all taught to have this warrior mindset. You know, I got your 6, and we bleed blue blood, and I don't even talk like that. I don't get caught up into that kind of language. I'm a person. I'm a man. I just happen to be in law enforcement. I've called myself a social worker my entire career. There's nothing wrong with the guardian mindset or the warrior mindset, as long as you know when to use that. Sometimes a guardian has got to transition to a warrior mindset, but at the end of the day, service to mankind is what it's all about. And if you're going to be a servant, you got to be a guardian.
Outstanding. And again, I'm just going to touch upon that. I think you need both, because when the situation is right and you call the police, let's face it, most people call the police because it's a problem that is beyond the scope of their capabilities, and you need to be able to respond appropriately. And at the end of the day, in police work, if everything went away and they defunded us down back to the Stone Age, people are still going to want you to be able to take people away that need to be taken away. And sometimes that requires a warrior mindset.
Look, I'm a really nice guy. I consider myself a guardian, but I've arrested a ton of people in my career. So you can be a guardian and still do your job and still make arrests. I mean, but you also got to understand we can't arrest our way out of crime.
So that's the second time you've given me a completely different show topic. So since you've done that, I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to need to have you back a second, maybe even a third time, so we can address these other show topics that you seem to be coming up with. So London wants to know, how do you get your officers to change their mindset in regards to getting more involved in the community? I've heard too many cops say that community relations is not their job. So I think you spoke to that earlier in the broadcast about not hiring like it's 50 years ago. But really quick, can you touch upon that again?
Yeah, London, you're so right. I hear that too. You get these cynical police officers, especially folks who've been on the job 20, 25, 30 years. They'll say everything is becoming touchy-feely, and I don't believe in all that community policing stuff. Well, those are folks that need to be moved on. They are out of touch. Some of them, you're not going to be able to change their mentality. You put them in places where they're least harmful to you, and offer them an early retirement. Get rid of them. They're no good. If they're not going to follow the mission of the agency, they're doing you no good. You just let them hang around to get a pension, and that's what's hurting all of us, because they poison the new folks coming in. They're going to tell you this or that or the other. Don't buy into that. Those are people that need to be gone, and we got to do a better job getting rid of them. On the front end, we got to do a better job at onboarding folks and making sure they know the mission, they understand the mission. Every decision they make is predicated upon the mission. I don't care if you're an officer, a sergeant, a lieutenant, captain, major, chief. You cannot make a decision that doesn't tie back to the mission. If so, they're out of bounds.
Outstanding. And to touch upon that really quick, I think that in agencies, we need to do a better job of promoting and highlighting the officers that are going out there and they're demonstrating the values of the department and the mission of the department, instead of just whoever tops a test or whoever's the most fun to go out and have a beer with, or the person that you graduated high school with or went to the academy with. We got to do away with that, for lack of a better way to put it, that good old boy network way of elevating people. And we have to start elevating the people that best embody the mission of an agency.
But Dean, that's why we've got to increase our standards. It's why I'm pushing so hard in Georgia and across this country for better standards, better retirement. We can't have folks working until 67 to get Medicare before they retire. We got to come up with better retirement plans. We need a background check that's similar to top secret security clearance, because if you have more skin in the game, you'll make less of these horrible decisions. Why do you think we don't have state police and federal police doing things like we saw at Derek Chauvin? They have more skin in the game, and we've got to get to a point where we can do that. We've also you can't just hire a person with and I'm not picking on a GED or high school diploma. That is fine. But you have these officers who think, I don't need college. I don't need some liberal arts education. Well, really you do, because you need to understand diversity. You need to understand how other people live who are not like you. And that's a good way to get it. It gives you some time to undertake studies and learn what's going on in police work. We can't keep hiring like we did 50 years ago, or we're going to continue to have the problems we have.
All right, folks. I know there's more questions in the chat, but Al, as promised, I broke a promise you. I told you with about 8 minutes left, I'd stop and we could talk about what projects you have, but the chat was so hot we had to keep going with it. So I apologize if I can't get to your questions. I will try to circle back at some point and answer them after the broadcast. So Al, we're down under 5 minutes left. What are you passionate about? What projects are you working on? How can people follow you?
Look, I'll try to use 1 minute for that and then give you time to get to questions if you want. Look, I'm on Facebook, Burke County Sheriff's Office, Alfonzo Williams. You can find me on LinkedIn, Alfonzo Williams. I've written 3 books. I have a 4th book that's coming out at the end of this month. It'll be all of them on Amazon.com. My first book was a memoir about my life and police work. It's called Not Here to Be Served, from Matthew 20 and 28. The Bible says the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. My book is called Not Here to Be Served. My second book, Police on Policing, came as a result of the Rayshard Brooks case. I interviewed 15 police chiefs and sheriffs from around the country, north with unions, south without unions, small agencies, large agencies. We figure out how to increase police standards and get better training and knowledge and changing mindsets so that we can have better law enforcement. My third book is Murder in Augusta. It's a murder case I worked back when I was a 21-year-old detective, solved that case. It was an instrumental part of my career, and I have memorialized that in a book. My 4th book, probably my most controversial of all, which will be out at the end of this month, Truth Has No Color.
Ooh, I love the title. Give us a little bit. Give us a nugget about that. I want to hear about that now.
Yeah. So we're going to we're taking cases from across this country, very important cases like George Floyd, and we're going to examine those cases. The situation in Ferguson. We're going to take those cases and we're going to go through them, and we're going to call it like it is, whether it was justified or not, whether it was a racial situation or not. For many African Americans who think every police killing is unjustified, or whites who say, well, there was no insurrection at the Capitol. I'm going to put them all together and call it like it is.
I can't wait to get into that. Please tell me that's going to be on Amazon audiobooks. That for me, because when I'm doing my paper shuffle, I can't obviously read, but I love to listen to audiobooks and great podcasts. You might even be on one right now that I think is worth listening to when you're at work. And I think that that would be something that I'd be super interested in if you could tell me that. Is that going to be on audiobook?
The first 3 have not been on audio. I'll check and see about this one. This is probably going to be the best one yet. I'll get back to you on that. These are self-published, and so I'm not going to make the New York Seller's Best list, but they'll be out there.
Oh, well, that sounds outstanding. This says, Dean, can you post the ISBN number so we can look up and order? I have no idea what that is. I assume that you do.
I do have ISBN numbers, and I'll send them to you.
Outstanding. So once I get those, LinkedIn user, whoever that is, I will put them on the Supply the Why LinkedIn page for all to see. So we are getting down to the last 90 seconds or so. I just want to say this has been an amazing conversation. Al, this was everything I envisioned. Full disclosure, I have been silently following Sheriff Williams for quite some time. I was in a leadership class with the gentleman you mentioned earlier, Dean Crisp, and he mentioned your name. This was a couple of years ago, and ever since then, I've been intrigued by you, and I follow you on LinkedIn. And I got to be honest, I didn't have the courage to come out and ask you to be on the show because I thought you'd big time me. But the fact that you were willing to come on the show is amazing.
This has been an amazing opportunity for me. Our mutual friend, Dean Crisp, I teach with Dean. Dean has been in my agency to teach leadership classes over the last several years. I travel the road with him and teach some Leaders Helping Leaders Network. He's an awesome guy. Dean, you're a great guy. Thank you. Eric McCants tried to get me on your show back in February, and I must have had a lot going on. I'm glad we had a chance to meet tonight. I would love to come back if you'll just have me on. We can talk more. I can talk forever. We're trying to change the culture of leadership across this country. And I'm starting right here in small Burke County, Georgia, just outside of Augusta, Georgia, home of the Masters.
Well, You got friends up in New England now too. So we couple things. I wish you well. I hope that you guys get a real pro football team down there, like the Patriots. You guys can work on that, maybe get that going. But of all seriousness, thank you again so much for taking the time out to be here, Al. It's been great talking to you. And if you're watching the show, please like, subscribe, and share to all our social media platforms. People need to hear these conversations. So again, everybody have a wonderful night. We'll see you again next week for another great show. #Supply the Why. Take care, everybody.